I'm Mark Dresner, and welcome to the Research Insider, a special executive interview series with market research and consumer insights leaders and experts, each of whom will be featured at the Market Research Event 2011, the most comprehensive conference in the world dedicated to elevating the business value of insights, taking place November the 7th through the 9th in Orlando, Florida. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Sandy Kelly. She's the manager of Strategic Customer Insights for 3M. Sandy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start out just briefly with a little bit about your current role and responsibilities, if you could, Sandy.
Okay. At the moment, I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades, and I hope I'm a master of at least some of them. We're quite low on staff right now, so we're always juggling priorities. And my basic functions are I'm the go-to person for customer loyalty studies and methodologies for that. I work with a couple of divisions on strategic market research planning. I execute a number of primary research projects together with our DIY group and also with vendors. And then I just consult on some other projects. I'm supervising a small group of 3 who work on secondary research, competitive intelligence, and some qualitative projects. And I teach classes on customer loyalty and competitive intelligence through Marketing University. So I would say I'm either very well-rounded or very scattered.
It's all relative, I suppose.
Yes, right.
I'm glad you mentioned DIY group, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because at last year's market research event, you in fact were presented with a Disruptive Innovation Award, which was sponsored from one of our event sponsors, the online research community known as Next Gen Market Research. And it was a controversial topic for which you received the award, and that was DIY or do-it-yourself research. Just give us a little bit of background on the initiative as it was when you received the award, and if you could, if there are any updates for our listeners since then.
Sure, be happy to. Basically, what we have is what we call a fee-for-service model, and the employees of this fee-for-service department, so to speak, are new grads. We hire them as contractors, and most of them have psychology backgrounds, the reason being that they have had some experience in their psychology undergraduate work in experimental design. And they also know SPSS, so they're quite good at analyzing data from surveys. And so basically they help write surveys. They need training there when they come in, but they get pretty good at it after, not too long. And analyzing the data and, just helping our internal customers with their survey needs. We use Vision Critical to program the surveys, and we do that ourselves. And then, as I mentioned, they do SPSS. And we also do conjoints now through Sawtooth. Started in the past year also adding the ability to do segmentation surveys. We have a couple people that are trained in segmentation now. And in order to do the surveys, we also purchase panel from vendors whenever we need it. Sometimes we have customers we're talking to, but a lot of the time we need panels. And in the past year, we've grown 44% in revenue, and for the 2 years before that, I think we were growing like 60 to 70% per year. So there's no doubt that it's something that's caught on. And as long as we can continue to do, a top-notch job, I think it'll, keep growing. We've added also, besides some of the more survey capabilities, we've added a lot more secondary research that we're doing. And with that comes kind of some project management issues too, or services that we provide, all those kind of secondary. And then we've trained a couple of our contractors in moderating, so we have the ability to we do a lot of telephone in-depth interviewing now.
Okay.
Which is very helpful to the division, we find.
Interesting. So you're actually almost, if you will, reverting modalities, from online to telephone. By that I mean, it's kind of taking a step back.
Telephone. The telephone stuff is qualitative, so it's kind of separate but equal.
Let me shift gears.
Sure.
When we initially spoke prior to this interview, you mentioned that data synthesis and integration, these are a critical agenda item for you. I'm hearing this from research leaders at other major corporations as well, comparable to 3M. Why is this an increasingly important issue for you, and can you share any examples that will sort of bring it to life for our audience?
It's interesting that you say you heard this from other executives, because I find that you can hardly go a full week without reading some survey results from some survey of executives or hearing about a webinar that covers this issue, and they keep saying that the survey shows that one of the biggest needs of C-suiters is for secondary and primary research and all of the social media and everything to be synthesized into a whole. And you have to learn to be a storyteller and put this all together and make it compelling and make it interesting, for the management of a company. And that's really, really true. And it's the one area I would say that most market research departments are not attending to the way that they could or should. And there's a reason for it, of course. There are other priorities. Just getting a project out the door takes precedence a lot of times. But the fact is, we have reams and reams of data. We have virtual warehouses of data if we printed it. But we just have difficulty integrating it into that complete story. The Advertising Research Foundation has a model that I recently saw on a webinar. It's an insights value creation model, and it spoke to that very subject. And it talked about how the learnings are only valuable when they're synthesized and made impactful by putting the human element, which in our case is usually the customer, at the center, and you communicate it in some kind of a relevant, lively way. The old value center for market research was always focused around the market research activity itself. In other words, just the tactical study. But no more. We can't do that because just the fact of the amounts of data that are out there prohibits us from being able to do that anymore.
Yeah, we're definitely. You hear this increasingly. We are in the quote air quotes big data age.
Right.
And some of the, you mentioned one key challenge, which is obviously time and resources. You have a day job, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
What are the other challenges that you would say are, or impediments that you're facing with regard to, successfully getting to the point where you do have a solid data synthesis apparatus in place? And how do you propose to get past some of these roadblocks or hurdles that you're facing?
Well, I think the most elementary challenge, and the one that comes to mind first, is just to have a vehicle or the technology gathering mechanism so that we can have easy access to what's been done in the past. We have that at 3M. We've had it for a number of years. We have a market research database. We're a huge company with lots of divisions, as you know. I don't even remember the number offhand, but all projects should be entered in that market research database so that we can go back and reference them. It would make it a lot easier to do this kind of assimilation into the culture data gathering that we'd like to do. But, we always struggle with getting people to consistently use it and use it the right way, although it's really come a long way, and really most people do use it, but some people just seem to be skittish about it, and I don't know the reasons, but I think maybe we have to do a better job of although we've tried. I don't want to denigrate the efforts we've made already because we really, really have tried to make it part of the culture. But, we couldn't put a price tag on its value. If you tried to say, this is worth so many dollars, it's priceless, really, if we maintain it. So it's a struggle, though. And then we have all these data streams that are flowing in, So
in fact, like most organizations comparable to 3M, you've got quite a few data streams. You've got surveys, qualitative now. You've got phone. You mentioned sales data, syndicated sources, inbound customer complaints, and feedback, which I know is an area of importance to you. Social media monitoring and analytics, usability testing, and even in 3M's case, in cases through clinical trials. So my question would be, who should own responsibility for synthesizing all of these different data sources and streams? Is it market research?
I think it is market research for the most part. I think, market research is kind of maybe even an antiquated name for what a market research department does now. A lot of companies have changed the name of that department, and even us now, we've changed recently to Strategic Customer Insights, and that's inadequate to describe what we do, really, but we want to emphasize the strategic and the customer, because that's what we want to tell people that our major responsibility is. We're like the chief customer advocate, something like that. That's a title that you sometimes hear bandied about, but I don't think anybody actually has it, although probably someone does. And we can't shut that river off or dam it up, that river of data, but we can find ways to, hopefully we can find ways to direct it so that it becomes more useful and part of the culture.
And that is, I asked you if market research should own this, and my next logical thought would be, do market researchers, as traditionally conceived, are these the people with the aptitude and the talent to create the kind of ultimate information or insight product? Probably a rhetorical question, but for suitable for management, a synthesized product like the kind that we're discussing. And you mentioned that actually research by conventional definition is probably antiquated, I believe is the term that you use. And I think that's a really interesting point, because we are looking at perhaps a skill set that traditionally was not required but is now necessitated, certainly by just the vast and sundry and disparate and diverse sources of information that we have today that were not accessible to us in the past. So we're looking at kind of an overarching information services and consultative kind of mindset, I take it.
Yeah, I think of it as, it should be centralized, I think, in a company like 3M, to the extent that you don't want to become too acculturated into the division. There's a certain arm's length relationship that I think market research should have. They always talk about having a seat at the table. Market research, for years, this was drummed into us. You need to get a seat at the table. You need to get a seat at the table. Never really felt like I didn't have a seat at the table, but when it comes to customer advocacy, the voice of the customer and the vision for the customer, I think we should be at the head of the table. And I don't think that can happen unless you're kind of a corporate function that's offering these services to the marketing departments of the various divisions. As far as skill sets go, you're a journalist, so I think the who, what, where, why, when, how much, how that kind of stuff is really the critical skills, curiosity, and just have the ability to write and synthesize and advocate. Simon Chadwick, in that seminar I mentioned before from the Advertising Research Foundation, coined what I think is a new title for a market research person. He called it a polymath, and it's from the Greek, and it means having learned much, a person whose expertise spans a significant number of subject areas. I really like that. I don't think I can get the title approved, but through human resources. But I like it. I like the idea behind it. And it's not the only skill set we need. We also need the management of the department, and then we also need the type of people who are out looking for new tools and who are moving, research in general from the tactical to the strategic. We need that too. We need all kinds of things.
a broad enough generalized knowledge base, if you will, to put things into context, the ability to communicate them, and the ability to manage the entire process. These are three key areas, would you say? Yes.
Yes, and to recognize an insight when you see one,
Yeah, that would be quite
simple,
helpful.
But it's not. Yeah,
I was going to say, do you think this is a common, this is something that researchers moving forward have to really learn, or is it something?
Well, I think I think that I certainly know of researchers who have all these abilities, but I would not say that it would be a strength of all researchers. Some would fit more in some of the other categories where they really are tactical in nature and they're carrying out tactical projects, and that would be what they enjoy doing. I think as market researchers, we've spent way too much time, emphasizing kind of the freaks and geeks nature of our job with the methodology. Oh, this is the methodology you should use, and this is, the way we have to select a sample, and all that is essential, and it's critical, and it's pivotal to doing a good project. But we need to move away from that a little bit and start to think of ourselves maybe as visionaries, at least some of us. So, there should be a person who has the responsibility for doing this, for integrating all the information and making a clear picture so it's usable.
Now, you're in an interesting but probably not unique position in that you have a database, you have an infrastructure,
right?
To curate this content. Now, moving the needle
Good
culturally,
word.
and getting everyone in the organization, to get in, if you will, in the groove of or in the habit of utilizing this resource and contributing to it as well.
There's some fear of using it too, I think. I think there's also some fear of using it in certain instances. We all have that, I don't want anybody looking at what I did kind of thing. Well, we don't all have it, but that's not
How do we
true.
mitigate that?
There's that hesitancy. It's human nature, I guess.
Do you have any thoughts on how to help people get past that?
Well, unfortunately, I think it is one of these things where it kind of has to be a top-down, you will use this kind of thing. And
Gotcha.
At least, even if they don't use it as well as they should, at least if they can, put the basic information about the study in there, then somebody will know who to go ask. In a company like 3M, you're always losing people, and people are starting to retire in droves, and we're going to be all of that conventional wisdom or whatever they call it, common knowledge is going to walk out the door.
All that intellectual equity hits the road.
Yes, right. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, since you have this database and accepting or ignoring for the time being the cultural issues and perhaps the rational or irrational human nature aspect of being fearful of getting into it, you also are faced with time and similar resource issues that make it difficult, as you noted, to really dig in and get into what would probably be a delightful challenge, and that is synthesizing this data. Is there any way that you can envision external research providers stepping in to help you achieve this on some level?
Well, in the sense that we still use external research providers to a pretty big extent. Not all of our projects are done internally. I guess they could ask us what the market research number. I mean, something as simple as give me the market research number from the database. I can't start this project. My contract with 3M says I can't start this project till I have it. That would be great, if they couldn't get paid until they had that number, and you have to put it in the system in order to generate the number. And maybe that sounds kind of, I don't know, dictatorial or something, but that's antipathetic to 3M's culture. But by the same token, it probably would be not a bad idea. And it just popped into my head as you said that. And, and then there are technologies that you can purchase that are databases, and we looked at some of those that vendors offer, but really the one that we have is probably, it suits our purposes for now anyway quite well.
So I think, just stepping back, I think that the one really great point that you just made is that if an organization is able to bring the vendors in, the suppliers, the research partners to help move the needle here, to say, here's what we're going to need. You said dictatorial, and I don't know that. Without disagreeing, I would say maybe a nicer way to put it is simply standard operating procedure.
Yeah, right.
And
that's true too. And sourcing has plenty of those.
Yeah, and to have them simply, help move everyone into that process, I think is a very,
because
very
we do that internally.
Idea.
We do that internally, I mean, our programmers are trained to say, what's the number, and what's the market research number, so they make sure that it's in the database. But we have people think that we're doing all this research internally because we have this DIY, but, we have tons of surveys and other types of work that are being done by vendors, and a lot of it's just not making it into the popular the lexicon of the database, which would be great if it would be.
Well, I think on that note, you've given us something to really chew on as a starting point for an organization that might be struggling with really, again, kind of curating all of this information and having people uh, in the habit and in the
Uh
mode
huh.
of contributing to it. Certainly, that would I imagine take a lot of people a long way toward reaching that goal of being able to finally sit down and synthesize it.
Uh
Uh,
huh. Uh
and
huh.
so on that note,
Yeah,
I
just
just
finding is
yeah.
the first step.
Yeah, well, precisely. If you don't have
Yeah.
it and you don't have all of it, if you only have
Yeah.
part of the picture, you're not going to get the you're not going to get the full puzzle put together,
Uh
obviously.
huh.
So
Yeah.
really interesting stuff, I think, for people to think about moving forward. And Sandy, I want to thank you for speaking with us today and really getting my noodle going on this because it's an interesting area for researchers. On that note,
Well.
I'm going to conclude this episode for today. For our listeners, if you're interested in hearing more from Sandy Kelly, she will be delivering a presentation titled, I love this, Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow, Listening to the Voice of the Complaining Customer at the Market Research Event 2011. For information or to register for the Market Research Event 2011 taking place November the 7th through the 9th in Orlando, Florida, please visit us online at themarketresearchevent.com. Until next time, this is Mark Dresner, and you've just heard the Inside Scoop.